Hi everyone, welcome to Fridays with Phil. Today I'm joined with 9 of my friends who also have motor neuron disease or ALS, and they're carers, and also psychologist Tarnya Davis. So a great Fridays with Phil. This is the first 10 minutes of an hour Zoom event that we had. So I hope you enjoy it. We're going to be covering today the importance of mental health, mental strength, when you are going through a terminal illness, but also through a journey of life, how important mental health is, how we can sit with our emotions so that we can walk through them, similar to Psalm 23, lying by the green pastures, so that we can walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And also we're going to be talking about self-compassion. You know, Jesus said in Matthew 22 that we are to love our neighbours as we love ourselves. And so I hope you enjoy this event. Again, everyone, thanks for joining this Zoom meeting. It's called Mind Not Disease, and we're going to tackle some quite deep issues, I would think, that we might not normally tackle in different avenues and different meetings that we might have. And I want to introduce Tarnya. Tarnya is my psychologist that I've been meeting with probably for over 5 years. And she runs a practice of 40 clinicians based in the Hunter and across New South Wales. And Tarnya has worked with people for over 25 years, specialising with people facing tough struggles in life. And so just the right person to have on our meeting today. So welcome, Tarnya.
Thanks, Phil.
I was diagnosed in 2013, and as I said, been seeing Tarnya for a long time. We've worked on many things. I've worked on the anxiety of loss, of self-worth, of losing significance and purpose in life, and Tarnya has helped me through this over the years. And so I want to open it up, and maybe I'll start it off. But certainly don't be afraid to ask some of the deeper issues of life. But because motor neuron, Tarnya, is a progressive disease, terminal illness, and we're getting weaker and weaker, the diagnosis is not, the diagnosis at the beginning is painful and dark, but the progression of the disease is one where we're always going through times of grief. Where we're losing either the use of our legs or arms or ability to speak. Have you got some answers for us to how to deal with those emotions as we deal with those progressive losses?
Thanks, Phil, and hi, everybody. And I'll start and say what a privilege it's been to work with you, Phil. It's been a long time and a long-term relationship, and it's a real privilege for me to walk alongside you and to be able to share some ideas that make a difference. I think that one of the really interesting things about this journey is that how we tend to approach dealing with a physical illness with a physical solution. We tend to spend our time looking for physical answers, and yet the psychological journey is so much more important, or as important, I think, that our minds and our bodies are so linked together, that how we deal with the psychological, the pain, the grief, the loss, the impact upon our families, the impact upon ourselves, our attitudes and what we bring to that moment is really so important. I think that some of what is difficult is really in your journeys is very similar to what happens in the community with regards to mental health. There would have been a time that no one would have spoken about the psychological struggles that people have. You know, veterans came back from the First World War and no one talked about post-traumatic stress. No one acknowledged any kind of emotional pain. And I think we've, over the generations, we've come a long way in starting to accept that we can be vulnerable and acknowledge our feelings, and that by doing that, it does make a difference. So with regards to this experience of diagnosis and loss, I think part of what makes it easier is to be able to learn to sit with the emotional pain. Right? We all have the tendency to push difficult stuff aside, difficult emotions that we don't want to experience. But if we can have that ability to be able to sit with the difficult feelings, it makes it a lot easier to bear. By pushing things away, I think we find that they only usually come back bigger and stronger most often. And it's a constant grief, as you say, Phil. There's the day of diagnosis, but that next part of that journey, there's so much loss, almost daily loss in the way you can contribute to the world. Maybe that's loss in work. Maybe that's loss of what you can add to your family. Loss of the things that made you feel good about yourself. And so again, I think that what's most helpful is to be able to sit with and acknowledge that loss. What's worked for you, Phil?
Well, I think it's interesting that you say sit with it and acknowledge it, because like how do we practically do that? Like how do we? And I think what you've taught me is we lean into the grief of it, we lean into the anger of it, and let that emotion take place, so that we're not ignoring it and just burying it. And through that sitting and through that acknowledging, move through rather than around or kind of trying to distract yourself from the emotion. And so it becomes a very real emotion that you can deal with and talk about and have conversation about. And I guess not be left alone in that emotion, not hide yourself from that. And so when you say sit with it and when you say acknowledge it, what's the best process? What are the best practical ways to do that emotionally and mentally in our thought processing?
I think sometimes we accidentally end up causing ourselves more harm when we try to avoid difficult feelings. And look, obviously that's all of our first port of call. So we have a difficult emotion. It might be feeling sad or angry or upset in any way, and that's painful. And so then we reach for what it is that we can do to numb that pain. So sometimes it might be alcohol, it might be distractions, it might be isolating yourself from others. And then what happens is we end up with two problems. We end up with the emotional pain that was caused initially by what life has thrown you. And then there's the second pain. It might be the consequence of using food or alcohol or numbing or distraction or isolation upon you. And so the solution, I guess, comes in self-compassion, and it can be listening to how you talk to yourself when you're having that difficult emotion and being kind and generous, almost thinking, what would I say to someone else that was going through this situation? Many of us have kind of a critical voice in our head that says, you shouldn't feel that. Why are you getting upset? Certainly the big boys don't cry mentality. I shouldn't be feeling this difficult emotion, and kind of beat up on ourselves around it. But if you can think, of course, this makes sense that you're feeling this way. This is tough. But you've got this, and being gentle and kind to yourself instead of harsh to yourself. And I think the other aspect, Phil, is to share with other people. it's a really brave step to share your emotional experience with someone else, and it's not something many of you are probably used to doing, but yet we know neurochemically, sharing your experience with somebody else, sitting with someone, connecting with someone, looking at them, brings about changes in your brain chemistry that settles your nervous system. And it's also about that human need to feel I'm not alone with this. And the other person may not actually understand what it's like for you. And of course, no one completely understands what it's like for you. But to connect with someone else, whether it's a psychologist, whether it's a partner, whether it's with each other, we certainly know that that is what makes a difference.
Yeah, I'll ask for people to have questions in a moment, so get ready. But I think that's a real key that you helped me with, is this self-compassion, self-love, self-talk. And I think the key was, like, Phil, what would you say to somebody else if they were going through exactly what you're going through, and hear yourself verbalize what you'd say to somebody else? And a lot of the times we have a lot more compassion and love towards others than we have towards ourselves. So if we can visualize ourselves talking to somebody else and then kind of throw that back in our face, talk back to yourself with those kind, compassionate, gracious, forgiving words, because we do go through beating ourselves up. We're putting our loved ones through what we're going through. We feel guilt, we feel shame, we feel insignificant. And what would we say to people who are going through those things? So that was really great, Tarnya, a lesson for me. Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed the first part of Mind Not Disease. And please, if you're watching via YouTube, why don't you subscribe or even leave a comment below. Peace and love to you all. Have a great week. Bye.